That is a remarkable number of little kids in this congregation. That's amazing. Kind of reminds me of little Johnny. Little Johnny went to school one day, and the teacher said, "Hey, what have you been doing this weekend?" to the class. And little Johnny said that the teacher said, "Well, me and my dad went catfishing." And she said, "Really? You went catfishing? Great. How'd you do? Did you have any luck?" He said, "Yes, ma'am. Had all kinds of luck." She said, "How many did you catch?" He said, "We caught 100 fish." She said, "You caught 100 catfish?" He said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, how big were they?" He said, "Well, they weighed 100 pounds apiece." She said, "John, you mean to tell me you caught 100 catfish and they weigh 100 pounds apiece?" He said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I don't believe that." She said, "You couldn't even get those on your boat." He said, "We did. We caught 100 catfish and they weighed 100 pounds apiece." She said, "Little Johnny, you have got to quit fibbing. You're just making stuff up." She said, "What if I said I was on my way to school today and there was a 10-foot grizzly bear that jumped out in front of my car and caused me to come to a stop, and he was about to attack me, but this little cocker spaniel ran across the road and jumped up and grabbed him by the nose, flipped him over, and chased him off. Would you believe that?" Little Johnny said, "Yes, ma'am. That's my dog." One of those kids might be. No, but when you think about the word apologetics, the fact of the matter is you don't think about the word apologetics very often, do you? I wouldn't have until I started working at Apologetics Press. And when I go to people and they say, "Hey, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I work at Apologetics Press," they often then say, "Apostolic Express, that's interesting. What do you do there?" And I say, "No, not Apostolic Express, Apologetics Press." Well, right after you say that, generally speaking, somebody will come up to me, like a little lady the other day. She came up to me, she took me by the elbow, and she pulled me aside, and she said, "I've got a personal question to ask you." I don't know what in the world she was going to ask me. She said, "What are you apologizing for?" Well, that's what people think lots of times when they hear the word apologetics, but it comes from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 21. When you go to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, right? When you go to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, the Bible says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is within you with meekness and fear." That word defense, always be ready to give defense, is in the Greek apologia. And what it means is a written or oral statement that defends something that you believe. And that's what the word apologetics has meant historically. In fact, early on in the Christian world, there were people that had to be apologists for Christianity, but they had to deal with different topics than we do today. For instance, early on, people spread the rumor that Christians were cannibalistic, that Christians ate people. And their reasoning for that was because they got together every first day of the week and they had a meal where they drank somebody's blood and they ate somebody's flesh. And the Romans heard about these Christians who were meeting in secret meetings, and they were drinking somebody's blood and they were eating somebody's flesh, and they thought, well, I mean, we do a lot of bad stuff in the Roman Empire, but we don't do that. And so they would often sentence Christians to death on the rumor that they were cannibals. Well, the early Christian apologist would go to the Roman officials and say, hold on just a second. We know that you have been told that we are cannibals and we actually eat people. We don't. We take something called the Lord's Supper. And the Lord's Supper is a memorial meal where we use grape juice to represent the blood of Jesus that he shed on the cross, and we take unleavened bread to represent the flesh of Jesus. We don't eat anybody's flesh, and we certainly don't drink anybody's blood any Sunday morning. And the Roman officials said, oh, okay, I must have misunderstood. But I hear that you guys are incestuous. I hear that the brothers marry the sisters in the churches because Brother Johnson will be married to Sister Johnson. And the early apologists, real deal, had to say, okay, hold on just a second. No, we are not marrying our biological brothers and sisters. Here is how we understand life. We understand that when you become a Christian, you are a child of God. Behold, what love the Father has bestowed upon us, says John in 1 John, that we should become God's children. And so when it's Brother Johnson married to Sister Johnson, that doesn't mean they're biological brother and sisters. It means in Christ spiritually they are brother and sister spiritually, but not biological. We're not incestuous. Roman officials said, oh, okay, interesting. And then the apologist would say, now, let me tell you why you probably want Christians in your district. Do you like people who pay their taxes? Well, the Romans really had two things that they did when they moved into a place. They wanted the people not to rebel against the government. They wanted them to pay their taxes. That's it. And so when a Christian apologist would go to a Roman official and say, hey, do you want people who pay their taxes? What does the Roman official say to that? Absolutely positively we want people who pay their taxes. And the apologist would say, well, it just so happens that according to Christianity, God instructs his people to give to those people the taxes that are due to them. And Christians who are obedient Christians pay their taxes. Would you like that? Absolutely. Also, would you like it for a group of people that doesn't break the law? They don't steal, they don't murder, they don't defraud. Would you like people in your area who follow what the legal institutions give them? Would you like people who obey the law? Well, the Roman official says, yeah, I like people who obey the law. Well, guess what? Christians do that. Christians obey the law, they pay their taxes, and, Mr. Roman official, you don't have any type of welfare system set up where the government takes care of poor people. And you got a lot of people on the streets that are orphans, and some of them are sick, and some of them will just be a burden on society. In fact, some of your Roman people just take their babies and put them on the trash heaps. That practice has been banned, but it keeps happening. You know what Christians do? They take care of widows and orphans, and they feed people who need feeding, and they take a burden off of the government. Would you like people who do that? Well, yeah. We'd like people who do that. Great. Well, then you need Christians in your area because they're going to do all of those things. You see, early Christian apologists, people who defend the Christian belief. Now, we don't have to deal with those same topics in the United States of America today because everybody understands Christians aren't cannibals and the Christians aren't incestuous, etc. But every generation, there are different things that we do have to defend, beliefs that we have to stand up for and say, this is what God teaches, this is what God says, and here is the truth about those subjects. Let me tell you right now what we don't deal with in the United States of America. I've been at Apologetics Press now for about 18 years, and I've never once had anybody call me and say, Kyle, we need you to come do a lesson on idol worship. We've got some people in the congregation, they're real good folks, but when they come to church on Sunday, they will worship, and then they'll go home, and there's a little gold statue that they have in their house that they will bow down to, and they'll sacrifice some bananas and some Honeycrisp apples to, and we need you to address that because we've got a lot of idol worshiping going on in the Pulaski area. 18 years been at Apologetics Press, and never once has anybody invited me to do a lesson on idol worship. Do we need a lesson like that in the United States of America? Not really, because most people aren't idol worshipers. Now, 21st century, do we need a lesson like that if I go to India? In India, do you have to preach lessons on idol worship? Oh, absolutely. In fact, you'll have literally thousands of Indians, people from India, who will become Christians, but they will also, on Sunday, after they go to Christian worship, they'll go home and they'll sacrifice to their family God, and they'll put fruit sacrifices and offerings in front of that family little idol, and they will worship that idol. There are some 300 million different idols in India, and if you're going to defend Christianity, you've got to deal with idol worship, but not here in the United States. And so the question to us is real simple. What in the United States do we have to deal with that is troubling the faith of our people, or that is a question that people, when we go and talk to them about Christianity, will have in regard to what we believe? Now, what you're going to see in the sermon hour is there is a question that a lot of people right now are struggling with, and that question happens to be, remarkably, is there a God? Now, if you had have told me when I was 16 in Columbia, Tennessee, that, Kyle, one day you're going to grow up and work at a place where so many people ask you to come talk on the subject of the existence of God that you have to turn down more invitations than you take because that is a current problem in our country, I would have said that's crazy. I would have said everybody knows there's a God. Everybody understands that. When I was growing up, the religious discussion was not, is there a God? The religious discussion was, hey, how do you become a Christian? Well, over in Acts chapter 2, verse 36 and following, the Bible says this, and then somebody would say, yeah, but what about Romans 10, 9, and 10, where it says, believe with your heart and confess with your mouth? And then I would take them over to Romans 6, where it says, yeah, but these Roman Christians were already baptized into Christ, because don't you know, as many of you as have been baptized into Christ, have been baptized into His death. And that's how the discussion went. That's not how the discussion goes now many, many times. I'll just give you for instance, if you would have asked me and the 50, 60 kids that were in the group that we hung out with in Columbia, Tennessee some 25 years ago, in our youth groups at West 7th and Graymere and at the time Riverside, which is now Northview, etc. Out of 50 of us, if you would have said, how many of you know somebody who doesn't believe in God? I'm going to say maybe one of us would have said, I do. I was at the Madison Church of Christ right outside of Huntsville not long ago. There had about 86 kids in their youth group. I asked them, hey, will you raise your hands if you know somebody who doesn't believe in God? Out of 86, so many hands went up, I couldn't count them all. I said, hold on just a second. Let me rephrase the question. How many of you don't know somebody who is an atheist? And about 5 out of the 86 raised their hand. That means 81 out of 86. Oh, 81 out of 80. I never was good in math. Work with me here. 81 kids out of 86 knew somebody who didn't believe in God. In 25 years, we've gone from no kids in the church knowing an atheist to 85 to 8. I'm going to get it right here in a minute. To 81 out of 86. Not even a whole generation. Generally speaking, a generation is about 40 years. You're looking at half of a generation. And so, the idea, the topic, the subject, the question, is there a God? Is one of the most important that we can deal with. Now, the question, when it is asked to a person, hey, do you believe in God? How do you answer that? Lots of times a person will say, yes, absolutely, positively. And the next answer to that, member of the church, is why? Why do you believe in God? Can you present good, legitimate, reasonable answers as to why you hold the core Christian beliefs that you do? And I'm going to give you just a couple of those this morning. When we look at the Bible, God gives us some instructions as to how to argue for His existence. We're going to start right there in Psalm 19, 1 and following. In Psalm 19, 1 and following, the Bible explains to you that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night utters knowledge. There is no place, no language where their voice is not heard. What is he saying? Offers us evidence of God's existence in Psalm 19, 1 and following. The what? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. You probably know the standard idea that's given as to the origin of the universe at the present. I'm going to give it to you. Supposedly 13.82 billion years ago, there was a tiny little ball of, they don't know what, so they call it a singularity. And supposedly this tiny little ball of whatever it was exploded in something they call the Big Bang. And that Big Bang shot out all over, and the universe started to expand, and gases started to coalesce into stars. Those stars started burning and exploding, and then planets started to coalesce out of the star dust that had exploded around bigger stars, etc. Supposedly the Earth started spinning and coalescing out of space dust around the sun about 4.8 billion years ago. That's the story that is told to us in most of our science textbooks. In fact, it starts in about first grade. And in about first grade, if you go to a standard public school and they are just teaching what's out of the book, they're going to say 13.82 billion years ago, this is how the universe began. Now, there's a very different story as to how the universe began. It starts in Genesis 1, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light, and God divided the light from the darkness, and the light He called day, and the darkness He called night, and evening and the morning, day 1. And then day 2, God creates the expanse or the firmament. Day 3, God creates the flowers, grass, and trees. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, birds and fish. Day 6, animals and man. Day 7, He ceases His creative activity. Now, according to Genesis chapter 1, on what day did God create the sun and the moon and the stars? On day 4. But see, according to that idea of the Big Bang, those stars and that sun had to come millions, actually billions of years before planet Earth, and that's just not the case. Now, how can we know that there is a God out there that is bigger and that is more powerful and that is supernatural according to the heavens? That's a good question. How do the stars tell us in our own language that there is a God? Well, there's something we understand. It's a scientific law called the law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect, it's real simple. It says that for every material effect that you see, there's a cause that came before it and that was greater than it. So let's look at how we understand natural laws. You know that a natural law is a law because nobody's ever seen, nobody's ever witnessed, nobody's ever done an experiment where there's a single violation to that natural law. And let's see what we can do here. I've got a pencil. And there is a law of gravity that says if I drop this pencil, it's going to go down every time. Every time I drop it, it's going to go down. Now, what if I don't like that law? What if I think, you know what? I wish when I dropped this pencil, it would just float. Wouldn't that be neat if when I let my fingers go, it would just float right there? And, hey, you know, I bet there are a lot of people that wish their pencils would float when they drop them. So let's get 1 million scientists, and let's all vote on the law of gravity. And let's vote to change it. So we get 1 million of the most brilliant scientists in the world. We vote to change the law of gravity. Everybody, hey, who wants to change the law of gravity? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, great. The ayes have it. Now, who's a volunteer to step off a 20-story building to prove that we've changed the law of gravity? We don't have any volunteers, do we? Because it doesn't matter if 1 million people vote on it. It doesn't matter if 7.52 billion people vote on it. Law of gravity is going to beat the law of gravity, isn't it? Now, the law of cause and effect says that for every material effect you see, there has to be a cause that came before it and that was greater than it. Now, let me explain to you an important verse that you've probably read many times as it fits into this discussion. Romans chapter 1, verse 20 says, "For since the beginning of creation, his," pronoun for God in that verse, "his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things which are made, even his eternal power and Godhead." Now let's do it again, and let's see what that verse is telling us. For since the beginning of creation, God's invisible attributes, stuff that you can't see about God. You can't look at God directly and measure this stuff, but you can see it some way. How? God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things which are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. What can you know about God from the things that you see in this world? Well, the psalmist gives you a piece of evidence, and he says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. And here's why. The law of cause and effect says that for every material effect you have a cause that came before it, and that was greater than it. Now let's look at that idea of greater than it. How big is our universe? You know, for years, people thought that you could actually literally count the stars. And we had several people that did. A guy by the name of Tycho Brahe, one day he decided he was going to count the stars, and he looked out in the sky and he started counting. Very well-educated guy. This was before any real powerful telescope or anything, so he started counting what he could see with the unaided eye. He said, I think I know how many there are. I think there are 777. They said, well, Tycho, I think you're a little bit off on that. Johannes Kepler, you might recognize him, came about 25 years after Tycho Brahe. He said, Tycho, I think you might be off. I'm counting about 1,053, I think Kepler said. Interesting, 1,053 stars. That's a bunch. Do you know how many stars that they estimate there are now? Well, I can't really even give you a number for that. We're just going to stop in our one galaxy. We've got a galaxy. You know the galaxy that we live in. If I were to ask you what galaxy we live in, you could probably tell me it's it's the Milky Way galaxy, right? We got the Candy Bar galaxy. We got pretty lucky there because there are some galaxies that got crazy names like Andromeda or Galaxy GX305L. I mean, we got the one that's named after a candy bar. And so it's pretty easy to remember. We got the Milky Way galaxy. You know how many stars are in the Milky Way galaxy? Well, they said for quite some time that there were about 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And let's put that idea into some concrete terms. Suppose that you wanted to get up every morning and you wanted to count to 10,000. Now, I don't know why anybody would want to get up every morning and count to 10,000, but let's suppose you did. I have my son, Drew, with me this morning. Drew, when he was about, I'm going to say he was about 6, he would get up before us. He's 14 now. He would get up before us on Saturdays. And I remember one Saturday, he got up before us, and he had been up an hour or so, and we got up, and we said, Drew, what have you been doing? He said, well, I got up and I've been counting. We said, really? We said, what have you been counting? He said, nothing. I've just been laying in my bed counting. I said, really? I said, what'd you count to? He said, 3,000. Ever got up on a Sunday morning, light streaming through your blinds, and you think, well, it's a great morning to count. I'm going to count to 3,000 this morning. Well, hey, Drew did, got up, counted 3,000. What if you got up Saturday morning, you decided you could count to 10,000? And then the next morning, you decided you were going to count to 10,000, and you did as fast as you could. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. As fast as you could count. And every one of those numbers represented a star. Now, let's get our mind around stars just a minute. The sun is about 93 million miles away from the Earth, and it's a middle-sized star. It's not remarkably big. It's not remarkably small for stars. It's just right in the middle. And it's 1 million times bigger than the Earth. So you could take 1 million Earths and fit them inside the sun. Now, there are some stars that are 450 times the size of the sun. So you could take 450 suns and put those inside of these larger stars. That means you could put 450 million Earths inside of one star. Okay, so we're counting 10,000 every day. Every one of those numbers represents a star. 1, 2, every one. You count 10,000 one day, 10,000 the next day, 10,000 the next day. Do you know how long it's going to take you to count to 100 billion? It's going to take you approximately not 100 years, not 1,000 years, not 10,000 years. It's going to take you 27,000 years to count to the number 100 billion if you're counting 10,000 every day. So it takes you 27,000 years. Actually, it's about 27,452. We're somewhere around there. It takes you over 27,000 years to count to the number of stars that they estimated were in the single Milky Way galaxy. Oh, and then in one paragraph, one sentence, they said, well, we think our calculations are incorrect. We didn't calculate for the space dust that was getting in the way of our telescope. And when you do calculate for the stuff that's getting in the way that you can't really see, we actually think there are 300 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Now here's the question. You've got one galaxy that's got an estimated 300 billion stars in it, and it's a material effect. It's got to have a cause. Now here's what we know about causes. They have to be bigger than the effect. Let me explain. You understand this, but suppose that you were riding up I-65 and driving up I-65, all of a sudden you see one of those UPS trucks. And they've got the double trailer on it, and all of a sudden, boom, it comes to a screeching halt, does 5 flips, and ends up in the ditch. You think, oh, what's going on here? Need the help, so you pull over, you get your cell phone out, you dial 911. You go over to the driver, and thankfully, even though 5 flips he's done, he's all right, but he says, hey, guys, you got to get everybody off the road. And you say, why do we got to get everybody off the road? He said, I saw it about 10 yards in front of me. I couldn't swerve. I couldn't do anything about it. It was just right there. And you say, what? What did you see 10 yards in front of you? He said it was the biggest, meanest looking mosquito I've ever seen. And he said that mosquito planted in my grill and caused my truck to do 5 flips into the ditch. And you're on the phone with 911 and you say, hey, I think we've got more serious head trauma than I originally thought. You got to get here quick. Why? Because mosquitoes don't stop UPS trucks. They don't cause them. Why? The cause is not big enough. Now, what are we told caused this universe where we have one galaxy that's got 300 billion stars in it, and some of those stars are 450 million times the size of the Earth? We're told by the smart people that a tiny singularity that was 10 to the negative 23rd centimeters across, so small that you couldn't even see, you could hardly see it with a microscope, exploded and caused this massively humongous universe. Now, the problem with that is we know that can't be true. If you're just following the natural laws, you realize that violates the law of cause and effect. And that's why in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, when Paul wrote to the Romans, he said that you could look at the things that are made and see God's eternal, what was the word? Eternal power. There's got to be something bigger than the universe, and a tiny ball of whatever it is doesn't do it, and everybody recognizes that. Now, let me just finish out how big the universe is. You know our one galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy? Let's say we could fly across it. Theoretically, let's just work with me here. If you could fly across our one galaxy, let's say that that's the end of our galaxy at that pole. We'll start the other edge of our galaxy right here. If you had a spaceship that could travel the speed of light, which is the fastest thing we know basically, at about 186,000 miles a second. You count to 1, and light has traveled around the equator of our Earth in a single second 7 times. 7 times after counting 1 Mississippi. That's how many times light goes around the equator of our Earth. You start right here, and you're in a hypothetical spaceship that can travel 186,000 miles a second. You know how long it's going to take you to get from one edge of the Milky Way galaxy to the other? Not 5 years, although that'd be a lot. Not 10 years, not 100 years, not 1,000 years, not 10,000 years, not 50,000 years. It's going to take you 100,000 years to, traveling the speed of light, get across one galaxy in the universe. How many galaxies are there? That's a real good question. They estimate right now that there are 100 billion. So start counting to 10,000 every single morning for 27,000 years, and you count the number of galaxies, and there are some 100 billion to 400 billion stars in every one of those. Now, where do you get something that big? How do you get something that gives you a cause for a universe that large? Why did the psalmist say the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork? Because you can be in whatever country it is, doesn't matter what language you speak. If you honestly look up into the night sky and you see the literally innumerable stars in that sky, then it dawns on you as a human being that there's got to be a cause, and that cause has got to be bigger than this universe. Now, what's bigger than, just to put it in, right now they say if that was the edge of one side of our universe and this was the other, it would take you 20 billion years traveling the speed of light to get across. 20 billion. What's big enough to make a universe that big? Well, it's no wonder that this idea of a big explosion from a tiny ball of stuff just does not resonate with the honest, reasonable person, because it violates the law of cause and effect. And it shows you the power of an eternal, all-powerful God when you start to recognize how big our universe is. Now, there's something else about this Big Bang explosion idea that just doesn't resonate with us, and that's the fact that explosions don't ever cause order. They just don't put things together in a workable, functioning way. Now, I was down in Montgomery, Alabama, and I had about 350 kids down there. And I said, guys, we're going to see if we can make a cell phone today. And I pulled one out. I said, this is a cell phone. You ever recognize one of these? And I said, yeah, I recognize that, no problem. So I pulled a hammer out of the box that I had, and I said, this is a hammer. Let's see if we can do this cell phone. So I put it on that table, and I had a piece of cardboard down where it wouldn't hurt the table, and I just beat that cell phone to pieces. Bam! Now, you start hammering on a cell phone in the middle of a lecture with about 350 kids, and they pay real close attention. So I beat it to, probably 5,800 pieces, tiny little pieces flying everywhere, plastic everywhere. And I said, all right, guys, let's see if we can put this cell phone back together. And they're thinking, how in the world is he going to do that? So I scrape all the pieces off in my box. Then I didn't really ask for permission to do this. I might should have, but I had a pack of firecrackers in the back of my pocket. And I pulled one of those out, and I said, all right, you guys know what this is? Firecracker. Lit it, put it in my box, closed the lid. I said, all right, guys, what are we going to get now? And I opened that box slow, and I reached in, and you know what I pulled out of there? I pulled out a bunch of charred pieces of a cell phone. I certainly didn't pull out a working one, did I? Not in the least, not ever. That doesn't happen. You know why that doesn't happen? Because explosions don't cause order. They cause disorder. Well, maybe it was because my explosion wasn't big enough. Maybe if I blew it up with a, go for like one of those old school M80s that you can't even buy at the regular firework place. Now, the ones that were waterproof, oh yeah, get you a real M80, stick one of those in there. Perfect timing. Yes, sir. Is that going to give me a cell phone? That's not going to give me a cell phone, is it? Well, maybe a stick of dynamite will do it. How many times do I need to, maybe I'm not blowing it up enough times. How many times do I need to blow up the parts of it? I know it'll work because that cell phone was a working cell phone before I smashed it. I've got all the pieces in place. I've just got to get them back together. Am I going to get a working cell phone ever from exploding those pieces? Never. In fact, it doesn't matter how big the explosion is, doesn't matter how many times you blow it up, it'll just get less and less close to a working cell phone. Now, folks, if you were to take that cell phone illustration and apply it to the things that we see in nature, right now we've got about 200 of the most remarkable computing systems that are available in the entire universe sitting in this auditorium today. In fact, even the atheistic scientists say that the human brain is the most complex 3 pounds of matter in the universe. There are so many connections in the human brain, if I understand it correctly, that the connections in a single human brain are more than the connections in every single home computing system in the world right now. Let me try to break that down for you. The connections in your brain are more numerous than the connections in my laptop, in the laptops of every office in Columbia, every office in Pulaski, every office in New York City, all combined. The connections in your one brain are more than every single computer in the world. And it's in one single human brain. Now the question comes to us, how in the world could an explosion bring about the kind of order that we see in this universe? Not only in the human body and the human brain, but in the natural world where we see the animals that can do remarkable things that we're trying to copy and we haven't figured out how to do. Where do you get something like that? Well, the psalmist told us that the heavens declare the glory of God, and Paul echoed the sentiment when he said God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things which are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. Do you know the only reasonable and true statement as it relates to how this universe got here was written some 3,500 years ago? It goes like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's been true since the dawn of time. It will be true no matter what anybody says, no matter what vote anybody takes, no matter how smart anybody is that says otherwise. The fact of the matter is there is a God in heaven who created this world, and we are his creatures, and every one of us is designed uniquely, and we are all special, and we're all put here for a purpose. And the question comes to you this morning at the end of our Bible class period: are you using your life to bring glory to your Creator so others see what you do and they look to your Creator and say, I see what that Christian does, and that means their God is awesome? Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Are you bringing glory to the Creator who designed you uniquely and in a very special way? That's our purpose here on this earth, and I hope that we are all fulfilling that purpose. Thank you for your kind time.